President Biden not seeking a re-election, not in going for that bid. As he says, his sole focus now is fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of the term. All right, let's continue here on Live Now from Fox and discussing what that means in terms of what's to come in November. Just 107 short days away. I do want to bring into the conversation right now Allan Lichtman, professor at American University, has correctly predicted the election in 9 out of the last 10 times, although a lot of people say 10 out of the last 10 times. What do we make of this latest decision, Allan, and maybe what's to come for the Democratic Party?
This decision has profound implications for my prediction system, which I contend will right 10 out of 10 times. As I proved, 2000 was a stolen election in my report to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, but we won't relitigate that. Under my 13-key system, which measures the strength and performance of the White House party, if 6 or more keys go against the incumbent party, they're predicted losers, otherwise predicted winners. By Biden stepping out, they lose 1 key. They lose the incumbency key. But if the Democrats finally get smart and follow Biden's advice to unite behind Vice President Harris, and it looks like they're doing that, they will salvage a 2nd key, the party contest key. So losing incumbency puts them down 3 keys. They're also down mandate because of U.S. House losses in 2022 and incumbent charisma because Biden is no FDR. So they're down 3. That means 3 more would have to fall. If they lose contest, only 2 more would have to fall to predict the defeat. So what are the shaky keys you should be looking at? Social unrest, third party, foreign/military failure, and foreign/military success. Presuming, as it seems to be the case, there'll be a consensus behind Harris, Democrats have to lose 3 of those 4 keys. Possible, but not all that likely. Now, if you don't like the keys, just look at straight history. Since 1900, the White House party has never won re-election when you both have an open seat with no incumbent running and an internal party contest. However, we just have an open seat and no contest like the Democrats could achieve. It's a small sample, but that gives the incumbent party about a 50-50% chance of winning.
All right, that is a very good point. And those 13 keys, very, very important, as you've obviously predicted, made those procrastinations very, very well over the last 10 or so elections. I do want to ask you about another one of those keys in terms of scandal, because that is another one of those keys. Does this qualify potentially as one of them as well? And maybe how much of a gray area there is there for that one?
Absolutely not. As I indicated when you read my book, Predicting the Next President 2024, the scandal has to involve corruption and has to directly involve the president himself. President simply withdrawing, and we've seen that before. Lyndon Johnson withdrew in 1968. It's an internal party matter. It is not a scandal. There also has to be bipartisan recognition of scandal, as I note in my book, and clearly Democrats are not going to call this a scandal.
Yeah, correct. I just want to ask you that one as well. Those 13 keys very well in place for them as well. And you mentioned maybe the historical nature of this, the 1968 with Lyndon Johnson saying he wouldn't seek a re-election. Maybe how much do you look back at that at all? And can you put this maybe in a historical context for us a little bit more?
Yeah, Lyndon Johnson didn't seek re-election. And as you know, there was a big party brawl over the nomination of Hubert Humphrey, with the left wing of the party being extremely unhappy with that nomination. You had the assassination of RFK Jr. The upshot was, at a time of the booming economy, the 1960s economy, one of the best economies we ever had, we got the election of Richard Nixon, and the war was proclaimed. The Vietnam War was prolonged for 5 years, and we nearly lost our democracy. If the Supreme Court immunity decision that came down this year had been in effect in the 1970s, Richard Nixon would have gotten away scot-free with Watergate, and we lost our democracy 50 years ago.
Yeah, that is very, very interesting just to look at the historical nature of this as well. And of course, maybe the Democrats still have a significant margin, like you said, in those three keys about what's to come in the election. Let's talk about maybe the terms of Kamala Harris as well. And if they choose maybe someone other than Kamala Harris, do they still have an advantage in your eyes?
If they have a party fight,
Okay.
and either choose Kamala Harris after a brawl or choose someone else, they lose the second key, the party contest key. That puts them down 4 keys. That means only 2 of my shaky keys would have to fall to predict their defeat. That's why the Democrats, if they want to win this election, would be well advised to follow Biden's advice, avoid the mess of 1968 or the big party brawl, or 1980, and unite as a consensus party behind Kamala Harris. That still gives the Democrats quite a good chance of winning in November.
Yeah, and of course, the DNC, of all places, also in Chicago, Illinois, this time around in August. I do want to ask you as well, and I thought I should have asked it maybe last time, there are 13 keys as well. And as we continue to transition decade after decade into kind of a new era, 2024, are there any other maybe factors that you're looking at? And maybe have you ever considered adding to some of these keys?
The keys are as constant as the Northern Star. Every 4 years, someone says to me, something new has happened. You have to change the keys. We have an African-American running. Never had that before. A woman running. Never had that before. We have social media. Never had that before. We have a president resigning for re-election at the 11th hour. Never had that before. And my answer is you can't change a model on the fly. That's a way of creating errors. Secondly, the keys are historically based, but they're very robust. Predictively, they go back to 84, and retrospectively in development, they go back to 1860, the horse and buggy days of politics, when Abraham Lincoln was elected, when women didn't vote. Most African Americans were enslaved. We had no automobiles, no jet planes, no polls, no radio, no television. So the keys have survived much greater changes in our politics, our society, our economics, and our demography than anything that's happened recently. They're very robust, and I don't change them because of criticisms of the moment.
All right. I just wanted to ask you about that as well. Of course. My last question before I let you go, and of course we are kind of bookending 2 major moments in American history with what happened with Biden today, but also last Saturday in Butler, Pennsylvania, where the former President Donald Trump and the assassination attempt. Maybe how much did that factor into anything? And can you give us some historical context around that? Because the last assassination attempt came back in 1981. Reagan there goes on to a couple terms as well. Is that any weighing factor? And maybe are they really unifying on the Republican Party behind Trump this time around?
They were already unified behind Trump, and Trump had a great opportunity to expand that unity into moderate swing, undecided voters, and he blew it. Great speech for 25 minutes, then for over an hour, ranting, raving, the old dark, sinister, inflammatory, divisive Donald Trump, and he has continued that. You know, when Reagan was shot in 1981, the myth is, this greatly increased his popularity. Untrue. A year after he was shot, his approval rating was 43%. 60% of Americans said he shouldn't run again. Of course, he ultimately, when the economy improved, won in a landslide. That's why we don't govern with polls. But there is a big lesson to be drawn from 1981. His press secretary, a loyal Republican, James Brady, was grievously wounded. And instead of seeking revenge or political advantage, he did unite the country, not with empty rhetoric, but behind a real issue, curbing the epidemic of gun violence that was epitomized by the assassination attempt. And he and his wife pushed through Congress our last big gun control measures, the assault weapons ban, which has since lapsed. And I understand it was an assault weapon that was used in Pennsylvania, and the Brady bill for background checks. Not good enough to talk empty about unity. Got to have some issue that can unite the country.
Very, very interesting. All right, Allan Lichtman, thank you again for your time. I believe your keys aren't out. Your prediction is not out. Does this push the timeline for that prediction officially? And what do we expect to see it?
No, still after the Democratic convention, but I have a special edition of my live show tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern, and you can catch it at Allan Lichtman YouTube. Normally it's Tuesdays and Thursdays, but it's a special edition this evening.
All right, Allan, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. I know we're going to be on pins and needles waiting for this prediction after the DNC later in August. Thank you again for your time here on Live Now from Fox. A major day there in American history as Biden not seeking re-election. Appreciate it.